Meet our good new friend, Harman Smith. What does he do for a living? Glaze Nintendo. What do I do for a living? Play any video game you can imagine. So, I imagine we would probably eventually end up butting heads. Well, butting heads we come over Elden Ring. This game obviously goes in most people's top 10s of all time, and if it does not go in their top 10, it's widely considered a very good game or a game worth playing. I personally have the platinum for it, so I've played this game a ton, and I also know what I'm saying. And our good friend Harmon here has decided it is time to tear into Elden Ring and how it is so incredibly bad. So let's hear what he has to
Sacred
say.
cow has been slain. After Duskbloods was confirmed to be a Nintendo Switch exclusive, it's like somebody just flipped a switch. All of a sudden, people were beginning to notice the things that I had been saying for years, the things that I was bringing up, and the things that were very apparent to me. It feels like it's now kind of a mainstream thing because traditionally, the reason why From Slop was hyped up the way it was because it was something that the industry thought they could gaslight people into believing was better than Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. Like the entire
Now let me pause you right there. Who is gas A? They are not gaslighting that Elden Ring is better than Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. Yeah. I can say, as somebody who has played Zelda, both of them, Legends of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, who's played Mario Odyssey, who's played that kind of stuff. I've not played Metroid, but I can tell you that Elden Ring is not meant to kill them. Elden Ring is just conveniently better than them, and conveniently runs better than them, and conveniently is not on Nintendo Switch. Well, maybe by now it is on Nintendo Switch, but it is not going to be running nearly as good as on a PS5, on an Xbox, or definitely not on a PC. So, no, it might not be a Nintendo killer, Harmon. I think you just might not like that they're better, that it's better than you. So, let's. This is already gonna be
reason From
crazy.
Slop was allowed to become so successful and become so popular, like even though game journals can't really beat them and like don't really care about them at all, like the entire purpose of it was to downplay Nintendo, and that's
No, it really wasn't to downplay Nintendo, Harmon. I think it was Miyazaki wanted to make a cool game, and he did make a cool game. And well, I'm sorry if it filtered you. I'm sorry if it filtered all these game journalists. But if the game journalists are getting filtered and still saying it is at least a game worth playing, then I think it might be a good game. And 90% of people, I'm just throwing out a number, 90%, but a lot of the people who give bad reviews, some have major and real complaints about the game, which is understandable, say, oh, the game was too hard, the bosses were too OP, all of this, all of that. Well, that's a part of the game, and if the reason why you don't like it is because you're bad at it, then I think that's just on you. I don't see. It's okay not to like a game, but to go this far as to say it's making up lies about how it's supposed to kill Nintendo, which, I mean, kinda did. Not even gonna lie. Kinda did. It After I played it, I would rather go through another playthrough of Elden Ring compared to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. That also comes down to my personal preference.
very apparent. If you look at like new, old NeoGaf posts from like around 2011 and see how often like the posters on there insist that like Dark Souls is way better than any Zelda game. Like, you really begin to notice like the patterns of just how obsessive um and like cultish these people have been over the past like almost 20 years now. Demon Souls is almost 20 years old. So these guys have when Elden Ring came out, it was universally like considered a masterpiece. It was considered one of the best games ever made, and for a while there, like just before the Duskbloods was announced, there was this push to classify it as the game of the decade, and just like really glazing this and hype.
Okay? A push for game of the decade. I mean, that really just comes down to who you ask, because there are plenty of really good games that came out in the last decade. Red Dead 2, Witcher, all of this. Wait, was Witcher 2016? I don't know, but around the last decade, there have been tons of very, very good games that have come out that could qualify for Game of the Decade. Now, Elden Ring is one of them, and it depends on who you ask. Because some people might say, oh, yeah, it's Game of the Decade, but it's pretty universal that it is very good. And I have no clue what you're talking about Dark Souls and cults. I wouldn't surprise me, honestly, if you were in some weird Nintendo one, because the way you're acting, you're just trying to downplay Elden Ring's success and how it has changed gaming. While Breath of the Wild, you can give it some credit. It kind of started that giant open world, or not really, but it laid a lot of important framework for all kinds of other open world games. Now, Elden Ring took what Breath of the Wild laid out all those years ago. I'm assuming it was Breath of the Wild who really started it. It could have been something else, but that was the big, like, oh wow, this is what you can do with open world. Elden Ring then, like, took the stuff they laid out and made it better, made the bosses stronger, made weapons not break. The biggest complaint about both of those games is your weapons break. They take 3 hits. No, not 3 hits. It's not 3 hits, but you'll be breaking stuff mid-fight, and then you'll have to open a menu to swap weapons. I mean, I'm pretty sure, who was it? Little Aggie, I think? I think he made a video about how every 3 hits, his Elden Ring weapon broke. And it was a pain. It was a pain. And that was really the biggest complaint, at least in my opinion, about Breath of the Wild. Although it has been a long time since I've played it. Would be great to revisit it, but that is something for another time.
It up to be like this all-time great game. And like, for when it came to me, when it came to like, older players and people who like played Dark Souls and stuff like that when it was new and before it was popular, like there was this big like underground thing where pretty much everyone universally agreed that this game was not as good as Dark Souls. Like it felt like a rehash. There was nothing new, fresh, or exciting. This was just the same thing again with no real innovations outside of this idea that like, well, it's in an open world now, but there's nothing in it. There's nothing to find. It's not a fun game. Okay, like Elden Ring.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. You can get into your next point. But the reason why you think the world is empty is because you don't know how to explore. Now, personally, you can go like wander around, you can, even though it is a very big map and there's not things you can find everywhere. But if you explore, yeah, the world's gonna be filled with a lot of stuff. It is actually probably more filled than Tears of the Kingdom, what, Breath of the Wild? And, like, I don't know what underground scene is saying, oh, yeah, it hasn't changed much. And I mean, as somebody who's played Dark Souls 3, I started Dark Souls 1, haven't gotten around to finishing it yet. It's really does change everything. I mean, Dark Souls 3 to Elden Ring, it's gotten a lot faster. Obviously, graphics got better. Movesets changed. All of this. I'd say overall, the game was more open to new players, obviously with summons, with all of that. And overall, it was just a very, very good game. And I don't get why he's trying to downplay it. So,
Very specifically was not a perfect game. There were lots of things that you could say about it. There are lots of things that just weren't good about it. And like, people like myself were playing the game and bringing it up. It was very, very apparent to pretty much everyone that like, Elden Ring was kind of a disappointment. It wasn't what it was cracked up to be, essentially.
I do believe it was cracked up to be. Now, there are obviously valid complaints about the game. No game can be perfect. No game is perfect. Some of the combos get a little ridiculous at some points. But the game was hyped up well and it lived up to it. There was a reason why it won Game of the Year, and people who were like, "No, it shouldn't have won Game of the Year," or whatever else came out did. "Oh, Tears of the Kingdom was better." You can think at that, but it's most likely not true. Uh some games that came out before, came out after will sell better. I'm talking Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild, A, has been out longer, has gotten more chance for sales. B, you're trying to compare sales of a kid's game to an adult game. Now, a lot of teenagers, especially 13 to 14, if they don't have super watchful parents, will buy it and play it. But Zelda, people will be playing since they're like 7. Like, adults who are in their 40s will still play a game that 7-year-olds play. But Elden Ring, it will get a lot less of that younger audience because they don't want to, because they either get filtered out so fast and they tell all their friends, no, don't go buy this game, it sucks. Or they just can't play the game outright because it's an M game and parents don't want that. So, yes, there is a sales gap, but that sales gap is also for the targeted audience of the game and how there are less people who want a challenging game and it's rated M than there are little kids who want to play an easy adventure game.
This was not the best game of all time. It was kind of limited and stale compared to the much more innovative Breath of the Wild, which came out 5 years before. And
It was Elden Ring was very innovative. It took the same Dark Souls 3 style and it made it open world, but it added throwables, it added the physic, it added all of this to change up your build, to make it different. And while Breath of the Wild did that to an extent, it was so minor you could barely even notice. Like, I was playing it and I was like, oh, hey, now I just spam ancient armor and spam all of this ancient stuff and now I win. While Elden Ring, you can make a case to Blasphemous Blade, you can make a case for Rivers of Blood, you can make a case for all of these different weapons. But Breath of the Wild is just very straightforward, very linear. It has this is what you need to win. Elden Ring, you can win with a lot of different things and have a very good time doing it, and it will filter you just about the same. Now, there's obviously going to be some differences and all of that, but it'll relatively filter you in the same way. Using Blasphemous Blade and using Rivers of Blood, they'll have strong bosses, they'll have weak bosses. And you'll still get filtered about the same. Breath of the Wild, if you don't use this certain set, like if you don't touch stasis for the whole game, it's going to be a ton harder than if you didn't touch bombs for the whole game. Why? Excluding certain parts. Just like the combat requirements of some of those abilities, just like it doesn't make every playthrough different the way Elden Ring does.
Tears of the Kingdom, which came out the year afterward, like Elden Ring was just not on the same level as what Nintendo was doing at that time. Like, not even just with Zelda, but with like all their other franchises as well. And for a very, very, very long time, until the Duskbloods was confirmed to be a Nintendo Switch exclusive, the narrative was don't talk about this. Like, you could not criticize Elden Ring at all. You could not bring up the reality of its situation. You could not, like, critique it. You could not criticize it. This was a perfect video game. And if you criticized it, that just means you got filtered.
Now, while there are definitely people on the internet who will say that, they are wrong. There are valid critiques to the game. There are valid changes that you could say FromSoft should make in their next one. There are valid points. But you also can't act like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild doesn't have any. Arguably, they have more than Elden Ring does. And the biggest critique that most people will say is, "Oh, everything's too hard. They should add an easy mode." That's when players will come in and say, "Oh yeah, you got filtered." Well, that is sometimes the reality, but other times some valid critiques and people saying, "Yeah, you just got filtered. It's fine." Those people are just your average internet asshole. That's really all they are. So don't say you can't critique it. There are just some assholes on the internet, like every community has, that says, "Oh, you got filtered. Oh, you're just wrong." But no, there are some valid critiques, and it was not a perfect game by far, but it is a really good one.
Like, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I was told that, like, you just got filtered, bro, or you can't beat it, when, like, I actually played quite a lot of the game. I got like several hours in, I beat some bosses, and I kind of noticed that, like, it's really not that fun. It's really not that challenging. It's really not that difficult. You know, you just explore until you find things that you can use to kill other things. That's it. You know, there's no depth when it comes to like the dungeon design or the boss variety or the combat mechanics.
I'm gonna stop you right there. You don't even need to know. If you're comparing this to, like, Breath of the Wild, and you're talking about combat variety, I don't know, you're on something. Because Breath of the Wild, let's start there, has a sword, has a claymore, has a halberd. Three movesets of weapons in the entire game. That is the only thing you get. Oh, let me also add bombs and stasis. Okay, so you have two core mechanics and three different weapon types. Elden Ring has what? Like probably more than 15, especially if you count the DLC. That's a lot of different movesets of weapons and all of that. And then if you're what else did you say? Wait, I forgot. You're already not making any sense. You can't even
You
say in my
find
head.
things that you can use to kill other things. That's it. You know, there's no depth when it comes to like the dungeon design or the
Okay, dungeon design. All right. So we're going to start with Stormvale Castle. Arguably one of the better designed dungeons, in my opinion, at least. You can go up, you can go down, you can go left, you can go right, you can go anywhere. You can take that side path to go all the way around, and then you hit a grace where you can go jump up on roofs and off to the side, and then that'll get you to a different area than if you go straight. So, no, it's not. The dungeon variety is very big, and these dungeons are huge. Now, if you're comparing like these catacombs, well, they're gonna be smaller because there are a lot more of them, and they are not meant for you to spend like an hour in. And I imagine he is also talking about the legacy dungeons. And I mean, Breath of the Wild had what? Divine beasts? Those were just puzzle fests. These FromSoft ones are more combat oriented, which that is a change in style, but they're also uh but Breath of the Wild also has one of the most boring boss sets in like you can't even critique Elden Ring on boss design because they have that much more than Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild has four Blight Ganons with ever so slightly different move sets. They have what else? Molduga, Lynels, Ganon. They're that's Then you have like the standard enemies, like they have maybe 10 or 15 types, while Elden Ring has every boss is unique, every boss is different. Now, some of the dungeons are going to be some of the same, might be harder enemies later on in the game, like the troll, like the Beastman of Furimazula. You know, you might see those later on in the game, but those will get reused once, maybe twice, excluding Erdtree avatars, Bellbearing Hunters, Seed Beasts, those things do get used a little too much, which is a valid critique. So, yes, their boss variety could be improved, but it's also pretty good. Really, the only way they could do to fix that is make sure no boss is seen as a normal enemy, and like no uh archery avatars and bellbearing hunters, they only pop up a couple times. Like you cut down on them. But that's obviously not something they're going to fix, and that is more of a critique for next time. Breath of the Wild also had critiques on the Blight Ganons, and they did fix it, which was good, but you still had a main issue with enemy variety.
boss variety or the combat mechanics. Basically, like any other From Slop game, you just keep playing the game until you can find something that you can exploit that just works. You know, you just keep building your character until you can actually beat the next boss, and then you just go on to the next boss. You know, that's it. You know, there's no real technical depth to Elden Ring. You know, it's not really fun. Like, it's not even like well animated. It doesn't even look good. You know, anybody who says this couldn't run on a Switch One is like delusional.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. It is delusional for Elden Ring to run on a Switch 1. Like, I own a Switch 1, and Tears of the Kingdom didn't run good on there. So, yeah, it's not running on a Switch 1. And also, like, you're your whole argument for why Elden Ring is bad just like doesn't make sense. Like, yes, there is normally one thing you'll exploit, and a lot of people will exploit it, and it's good. And the way you normally find that is through exploring. When you explore, you might find area with a cool thing. Uh, mimic tier, you know, and you're going to find these cool items that you can exploit. And in terms of technical depth, you're wrong. Have you seen the buff sessions people will use on this kind of stuff? The amount of buffs they'll apply so they can come close to one-shotting bosses. It is crazy. And yeah, you can't say there's no technical depth because some of that buff stacking uh very much outdoes Tears of the Kingdom Breath of the Wild. And then you have all the different attacks and how they change in between weapons. Now there isn't very much attacks to each weapon because you have the tap heavy, you have the charge heavy, you have the roll light, you have the jump attack. You don't have very many different attacks and they don't change very much, but then you get into the Ashes of War and the standard smithing weapons. That is a absurd list of Ashes of War. That's probably what if you have all of them like 50 or 60 with a bunch of different infusions to make things do different things. So yeah, there is technical depth, Thurman.
I've been saying this for a long time, but it's so interesting how during the Wii era, there was this narrative that oh yeah, Nintendo games don't look as good, they don't play as good, they're not realistic, or the animations are sloppy, or people spurred out about Nintendo visuals, and then now in 2025 we have Elden Ring, which looks and plays worse than games that came out in 2007. It's crazy how sloppy Elden Ring is.
So I'm assuming 2007, you're talking like Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, that kind of stuff. I don't know the dates off the top of my head. But I mean, I have the remastered version of Dark Souls 1, and Elden Ring still outclasses a remake of the game, which probably made the graphics look a little better. And that goes to say how bad the graphics were at the time. Well, I'm not going to say bad, but how much graphics have improved at the time.
It is crazy what this game, like how little this game offers, and how little how little it's grown and evolved, and how they're still using assets and animation.
Ah, so an 100-hour game is barely improved from the 30 or 40-hour Dark Souls 1. Wow. That doesn't seem like much of an improvement to me though. Like, I'm Harman and I think that a 100-hour game isn't longer than a 40-hour game cuz it is. And you can definitely tell that when you're a guy if for some people who work 9 to 5s and come home and like, oh, hey, I want to turn on my game for a couple hours. Or sometimes they won't even turn it on and it'll take them a year to beat Elden Ring. Like, I mean, when Elden Ring first came out, I was talking to my dad about how it took him a year to beat Elden Ring. A whole year and 255 hours to beat one playthrough of that game. Now, there was some downtime, so that 255 hours might not be perfect, but that was still a year. And he wasn't playing every day, of course, but people who have normal lives, it takes them that long to beat some of these games. And I mean, Dark Souls still took him like 6 months, but it
That
wasn't quite
were
like Elden Ring.
established back in Demon Souls. This is an extremely derelict, rehashy IP with no real innovation or change. And the thing about that is that the vast majority of the audience just can't bring themselves to admit it. They can't admit how stale and repetitive these games actually are.
So, I'm gonna go and stop you right there on that one. If you're talking about reusing assets, A, don't talk to me while wearing a Tears of the Kingdom shirt. They basically reused an entire map in Tears of the Kingdom, so don't get me started on that. And the reason why it will barely change is because they perfected the formula over so many years. And they make enough changes to make the game feel fresh. They add new bosses, and they give the players what they play Dark Souls for. And if they would, I would personally prefer if I would have rather them made Melania over making new assets for some random thing that they use from Demon Souls. I would rather them make Melania. Personally. I'm like, yeah, use the assets from however many years ago, but you're still making a good gameplay, you're still making good bosses, you're still making good soundtracks, all of that. So I'm okay with you cutting corners for now. Tears of the Kingdom did not do that very well. The sky was bland, the underground was okay, sorta. I was down there for a while, and then I got bored. I got a little bored after I explored the whole map. Um, and then it was like, oh, hey, I'm never gonna pick up this game again. Elden Ring, I've played like 4 or 5 times all the way through, and Shadow of the Erd Tree, I think I went through once. No, yeah, once, almost twice, I think. And that's for someone who's been playing a million other games, Sekiro, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 2, that whole series, while still doing normal life things. That's a decent amount of time.
And they get very, very upset if anyone brings it up, and it's kind of considered taboo in the community to bring this up. Traditionally, like the idea that Elden Ring has fallen off, or that the idea that like Elden Ring isn't as good as like it's hyped up to be. Like it's just not something you're supposed to talk about. Like that's just the reality of the situation is that Elden Ring is a game with a ton of problems that clearly did not live up to the hype. And yet like the narrative has always been this idea that like well like don't talk about that. It's better than what Nintendo's doing. It's better than anything you've ever done. Like oh Elden Ring like Elden Ring is just the textbook example of like the random um third party game that was put on a pedestal because the industry thought they could weaponize it against Nintendo, right? And now that
All right. Now I think you're just kind of repeating points. But no, the industry was not trying to weaponize it against Nintendo. It was just conveniently better than most of the things Nintendo has made in the past years. Now, you can argue a lot of different things. You can say Tears of the Kingdom, in your opinion, is better than Elden Ring. But saying it is not a great game, or a good game, or. I take that back. If you're saying it's not a successful game, you're just delusional. And you can tell by the numbers, you can tell by the player reviews, you can tell from a wide variety of metrics, reviews online. No matter what metric you see a lot of people like it. So, yes, the game is very successful. No, you don't have to like it the way you can like Tears of the Kingdom better than it, but you've still got to be able to go, hey, this game was successful, and this game did at least highlight that third parties can make a good game.
it no
Let's
longer
keep
serves that
going.
purpose, now that it's getting a Switch 2 port, now that it's getting like a new entry exclusive to Nintendo Switch, like it's being taken out with the trash. Okay, like pretty much everyone universally agrees that the Dust Bloods is not going to be successful. It's not going to be as big of a deal as Elden Ring.
Well, A, yeah, I don't expect it to be nearly as successful as Elden Ring. I believe it was supposed to be a multiplayer game. You'd have to fact check me on that in the comments because I have not seen much about it because I don't own a Switch 2, so I can't play it. So I don't make any plans to play it, but I might see some videos of it. But this is another Night Rain situation where they're trying to do something new and innovative, which if a studio like that who has a formula and they try something new for a game, that's great. That means they're trying to make your experience better. And making that experience better means they're going to know what to do to make, hopefully, the ideal goal is always the perfect game. So the reason why Duskbloods probably isn't going to do nearly as well is because it's trying to try something new. And trying something new is very, very good. And that, again, you can even see it in like Nintendo with what they did with Pokemon. But that's a whole nother rant.
But like what people don't want to admit is to why, because I keep seeing people see this thing that like it's because like Nintendo consoles are inferior or like the multiplayer or anything like that. Like the simple reality is like From Slop was never popular. Like this was a game that was promoted and hyped for over a decade because the industry thought that this was going to be a Nintendo killer. They thought that this is something that they could use to finally be the elusive Zelda killer that they've been seeking out.
Okay, I think he's just going in circles at this point. But then again, I want to know who said it was going to be a Nintendo killer? I want to know who. And if it's one person, then you're going off of what one person thinks. How about instead of going off of what one person thinks, you go off of what the wider community says? They were not hyping it up because it was a Nintendo killer. They were hyping it up because they liked the games. And that's what honestly everybody should be doing. If the game's not good, then why are we playing it?
For the past 40 years. Hydlide couldn't do it, Dark Cloud couldn't do it, Dark Souls couldn't do it. But they thought that Elden Ring was good enough to pull it off, and in the end, it didn't. Like in the end, it fell flat on its face. It wasn't that successful. It was something that was like put on a pedestal and played by normies and sold to casuals who never beat it. Elden Ring is the very definition of a game that is all hype and no substance. And the simple fact of the matter is, after the failure of the DLC, after everything from Slap.
I don't think the DLC failed. Personally, I played the DLC a little late. I played it like a year after it came out because I hadn't even started Souls at the time. And I that's just wrong. Have you ever considered that there might have been a reason why the DLC for a game was nominated for Game of the Year? Now, it didn't win, but I also don't remember the last time a Nintendo game won. What was it? Breath of the Wild? And then they haven't won anything after? So, the fact that Elden Ring got nominated twice says something about the quality of it. So, I am also curious to know, what is your definition of a Nintendo killer? Like, run them out of business? Yeah, nobody's doing that. It would take a gaming community to run them out of business. Are they trying to go, it's more popular than Zelda? Well, nothing's going to beat the nostalgia factor as of right now. That, oh yeah, Zelda was my childhood. Like, you can't outdo that unless you are nearly perfect. So, while it may not yet be a Zelda killer, while it may not ever be a Zelda killer, it is sure a game worth playing, and a successful game at that. So if you can't realize it, I don't know, you might just be delusional. But I think this is what he's known for.
Was done, all the flops after, Armor Core failed, Night Rain failed. Like the simple fact of the matter is, the company is on the way out. It is never again going to be able to coast off the open world hype of Elden Ring. Everything else they do is going to be negatively held against them, and they will never again be able to gaslight people into thinking that Nintendo is better. And because they are now producing a Nintendo exclusive, inevitably what we're going to see is that more people are going to start realizing that, like, wow, From Slop is not as good as what Nintendo does. Like, that's just the reality of it. Nintendo fans have been saying that all the time.
So, what I'm curious about, obviously, it's probably not going to run the greatest on Switch, even though it is an exclusive, but you also have to keep in mind, these are people who have never ported anything to Switch. And I have heard things from people who work in gaming and work indie who have tried to port things over to Switch. And even they say, yeah, no, this is the hardest thing. We always do this last for a reason. Because Nintendo Switch is that much of a pain, has that many issues running, and because they're building the game exclusively for it, it could play okay. And Nintendo is obviously going to have the leg up on this because they have been constantly making games for their own platform. From Software has not. And I also don't appreciate you calling them From Slop, but they're called From Software, not Slop, because they make software and not slop, and they make actually decently good games.
But people who are like picking up these consoles for the first time are going to slowly realize that like Elden Ring is not as good as it's hyped up to be. Dustbloods isn't going to be good. Like it's going to be remarkable seeing that shift.
I've had enough of Harman. I've heard enough of his little rant about how bad Elden Ring is. And if you're watching this, go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. This is a little different than normal, but it's a little different than normal. So we'll see. I normally do platinum content if you're new here. Obviously, you're new here. First video. But I normally do platinum content. I normally make platinums on games. Currently working on the Resident Evil 2 video, streaming Resident Evil 4. So I normally do this, but I just had to go ahead and talk about Harman's little insults to one of my favorite games of all time. So, and before Nintendo fans go pitchforks and lighters and all of that in the comments, I do believe Nintendo does make some good games. These are not. I mean, have you ever picked up Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Have you ever picked up Fire Emblem Three Houses? These are games that I would personally probably say go in my top 10. But obviously, you're calling Elden Ring worse than them, and that is a lie. And the games I said you can't even compare. But Breath of the Wild, Zelda, I believe they are not nearly to the level Elden Ring is, which was why had to go and deal with this slander on Elden Ring's name.